And welcome back to day 4/5-ish. This is day 5, but I just finished season 4 of my 42 and 42. Survivor Marquesas, aka the first time that it came home. I'm joined by friends of the show, Sarah and Gia. Thank y'all so much for coming on. Y'all were two of the first people that reached out for any season. But Marquesas, I was so happy to have you both for this one. For everyone that watches the show, everyone knows that Marquesas was very big for me growing up because the winner looks like me. But even besides that, I just enjoyed a lot of the characters that were introduced this season, most of which we've never seen. All but 2 we've never seen play again, which I think is a very big disservice to the season because there are only really 3 episodes in the season where it really drags, and it's right after they take out John. It just kind of drags for a little bit, but even then, the interactions between Sean and Pascal in the next episode, the family visit episode after that, and then the episode where the general goes home. I think that this season is very underrated for some reason. I think because people feel like it was an undeserving winner, which those people are crazy. But we'll get to all of that. I'll start with Sarah. What were your first thoughts watching this season, and have they changed throughout the years?
Yeah, so, I didn't grow up watching Survivor, but the first time I watched Marquesas, I was pleasantly surprised because I'm not really an old school fan, but it is definitely my favorite old school season. And then I, watched it a little bit more and just really grew to love the vote counts, to love the characters, and just appreciate how the game of Survivor evolved so drastically in that season. And I think people don't realize how big of a season that was, just because of the biggest power shift that Survivor had seen until then.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably the biggest power shift that happens, period, until Vanuatu, maybe. But that's I'm trying to go through my head. I think it might be Vanuatu is the next time that there's such a drastic shift. No, I think that it has to be right. I'm putting my foot down. It is right. Gia, how about you? Initial thoughts on the season, and have they changed at all throughout the years?
Well, it's actually kind of funny that you brought up Vanuatu, because Vanuatu is actually the first season that I watched the full season of in the real time. So I remember watching Vanuatu when I was really young, and then I watched every season after that as it was airing. And then as I got a little older, I realized, I wanted to watch the seasons that came before Vanuatu. And I wasn't sure where to start, but I was looking through kind of the summaries of each season. And there were a couple sites that were big Marquesas defenders for different reasons. And I knew that Vecepia was the winner. So I knew that this was the season with the first Black winner, but I had never seen it. So this was obviously something that was on my radar. But I didn't actually watch Marquesas until it must have been my late teens, early 20s. So it really hasn't been that long in the grand scheme of my Survivor story that I first watched Marquesas. I loved it when I watched it first. I knew what big moments to expect, but recognizing it and watching it happen, unfold in front of you is just such a euphoric experience. And as someone that loved John Carroll as a villain of the season, as a very complex villain, but just seeing everything kind of turn on its head. And I just really appreciated that. Now looking back on it from my first watch to, I have probably seen this season the most, maybe 3 or 4 times. But looking back on it, I feel like I have even more of an appreciation for Marquesas, if that's even possible. I always had love for characters like Sean and Vecepia and John Carroll, and just all the different chaoticness that happens in the merge episodes. But I feel like even in the pre-merge, the earliest seasons, we see Mariano and the beautiful mess it is, and really voting out people that are usually considered assets to the tribe, voting out people that work hard around camp and are physically strong, people that put those worth ethic values on the tribe. And they kind of come together and realize, like, we don't need that. Like, this is a game for $1 million. We don't need to keep the strong just because they're strong or what their definition of strong is. Because if we do that, then we might be next on the chopping block because we don't fit their values. So just, there's so much more to get into, and I'm sure we will address it all because we're all big Marquesas fans here. But that is like, Marquesas is the season to do it first. Like, Marquesas is the season to really turn the game of Survivor and open up the possibilities for it on its head. And I just have so much love and admiration for this season, and of course Vesepia's win.
Yeah, and this is going to be a little bit of a longer recap than I have done for the first 3 seasons, mainly because of what both people just said. There is a lot that happens in this season that, even watching it for whatever time this is for me, I had never noticed. For instance, I never noticed that the immunity necklace is kind of garbage this season. It's really just like a necklace that Jeff has to tie on their back, on their necks every single time. And there's a lot of aspects of it. And I understand that, like, there were things out of their control, which is why they had to do it here. But, like, even, you know, a lot of the challenges are just like, what is this? Like, the kite challenge is the most infamous, I would say. But even things like, oh, shoot. Well, I wrote it down somewhere. Oh, even things like the actual tribal council location kind of look like a pavilion in a park. And he even points to it. He's like, oh, yeah, it's right over there. And it's for what it is, it looks very nice. But it looks like they're at a park and this is a pavilion and that's it. You know, there was this, I think the prize for the kite challenge was a Snickers bar, but also you get to snorkel or whatever. So the physical aspects of this season in particular really don't matter. Besides the fact that they basically threw them out on the island to see if they would die, because this seemed like the hardest physically challenging season that has happened up to this point, and we just did Africa. So, and I feel like this is one of the last seasons that they actually try to focus on the survival aspect before they start to move on to, people don't really care about that. People care about the strategy and the social aspect. We're still at this phase where, like, we're getting 2 minutes of strategy and then it's straight to tribal council. As compared to now where that's all we get. So what are some aspects, I guess, what are some aspects of this season that you feel haven't dated too well? And we're going to keep it in the context of the show because there are other things that just didn't date well just because. But aspects of the show that haven't dated well up to this point. Sarah.
I feel like that didn't date well. Like, what do you mean by that?
But basically just everything that I just said. But even things like, you know, Jeff will sit there during a challenge and we don't hear anything. Well, like, the challenges almost come off as more boring because he's not sitting there announcing everything that happens.
I did notice that, and I didn't realize, like, how much of the episodes were focused on camp life, which I really appreciate. But rewatching it too, I was like, oh my gosh, like, there's only 10 minutes before someone's voted out, like, and we just finished the challenge, you know? And I feel like that was a reoccurring theme, which I feel like I appreciate a balance of both. And the fact that it was just a very heavy emphasis on the camp life, I'm like, oh, I wish we could have seen more of that strategy talk. Like, in episode 8, the biggest episode of the whole season, you know, right after the chop the rope challenge, there was only like 6 minutes of like talking about the biggest flip in the whole entire game, you know? And I wish we got to see more of that, because I know, like, the Sepia was actually one of the last ones to flip, but we didn't really see that in the episode. And we just kind of saw the parts of, you know, Kathy trying to get people to flip, and Nilia and Pascal talking to each other, and Nilia convincing Pascal to flip. But there was like so much more with the Sepia's role that we didn't get to see. And I just wish they could redo the whole season and like show us more of the Sepia story, because
her confessionals
really dig into
funny.
if you listen to what she season, yeah, it's incredible, her story.
And going from there, I do want to touch on that challenge, which eventually turns into touchy subjects down the road, or whatever we call it, based off the season. Do you think that that was the right move in the end for the three people on the bottom, or do you think they could have potentially, the three people, so not including Sean and V, just Kathy, Nalia, Pascal, do you think that if they had potentially just stuck with the plan, that they would have been next, or do you think they could have potentially flipped it on those four?
Oh no, I honestly looking at the row 2-4 in general, and just the original row 2 members as a whole, they had to flip here. And honestly, I don't give production a lot of credit on a lot of things, but the perfect choice for an immunity challenge at that moment, because they would not have the capabilities to flip one challenge later. So the fact that it happened here was incredibly important. But I feel like outside of maybe John, Carroll, and Tammy, they're really, the other two members of the row 2-4 didn't really seem very strategically minded. They seemed to be content with this idea of going to the final four and duking it out. And from John and Tammy's perspectives, the ones that were shown to be a little more strategically minded, what incentive do they have to flip to the other row 2 members at that point? Like, they are guaranteed final four in their current structure, and anything that gives them a strategic edge, like, they kind of have it made if they stick to this plan moving forward. The fact that this was the first season to really question the importance of tribal lines, it cannot be overstated. Like, that is really what drives home, is that you do not have to just vote based on your tribe, where you started with your tribe. You can go across tribal lines and put yourself in a better position for the game. And Nalia is the one that says, we were too hard to be just 5th and 6th. And I do feel like that would have been their placements, or close to their placements, had they gone in that direction. So I'm really glad that they did flip, and this was definitely the best choice for them. Do I think they handled everything after the row 2-4 was gone well? No. That's a completely different story. Yes.
Sarah, so I do have a question for you, but on my TV I saw the reunion going, and Rosie O'Donnell just brought up Sarah's boobs and said that she was the Kimmy of the season. And it's like, please, God, get off of my TV.
I love Sarah.
What
Sarah's a quick Cleopatra.
Rosie O'Donnell pointing out her boobs. It's like, all right, dude. Sarah, you're wearing the Mariano buff. Thoughts on that tribe? Yes, I have it written down. Mariano's a train wreck. Both of y'all had mentioned that they were a train wreck. Were you surprised at the fact that we were still able to get 2 OG Marianos at the end of the game, like in the late stages of the game? Did you expect it to be those two? And just thoughts on that tribe just in general.
I love Mariano. It is one of my favorite tribes in Survivor history. I really love the hot mess tribes. I've always been that way about Survivor, but I think even though they were a hot mess, they were still a family. The Mariano morning show is one of the most iconic moments in Survivor, and I just love them. They really were just a hot mess family. They were probably, they were all just brothers and sisters and cousins and whatnot. But I was the first time I watched Marquesas, I definitely was a little bit surprised that it was Sean and Vecepia who did make it so far and were the last two Mariano, just because I felt especially Sean just kept getting targeted so many times. And the fact that he was able to maneuver his way to get that far, says a lot, but it also says a lot about Vecepia, because, she had his back, and, it shows how deep an alliance bond that can be. But yeah, I just love Maramu so much more than Rotu.
And my issue with Rotu is not even the Rotu 4. It's not Kathy. It's not Gabe. And it's that everyone besides the two people that I don't really have a problem with Nalia, but I feel like the show was trying to paint Nalia and Pascal as Roger and Elizabeth, but Roger and Elizabeth, they ain't. It came off as creepy for most of the season with their relationship. It's just it never felt like a father-daughter thing to me. It felt like a daughter-father thing. Like it felt like Nalia actually saw this man as like her father figure. It didn't really seem that way the other way around. And that just might be my bias towards the fact that I don't like Pascal in this season at all. When he falls out of his little chair after the rock draw, I'm like, I hope he stays there. He didn't. It's fine. But there are a lot of things that he says this season that just don't sit right with me. And I'm not one to, play that card if it's not meant to be. But in this case, it's kind of hard not to. Saying things like if a person like Sean or V were to sit at the end, it'd be a disservice to the game. I hate when those types of people bring up the race card, this, that, and the other. Trying to paint the target back on them when Sean is like, we know that you two have said you won't vote for each other. You have outwardly said, I won't vote for Pappy and I won't vote for Sweet Pea. Fucking Sweet Pea. I won't vote for Sweet Pea. And on the other end, you have Vesepia, who has voted against, not exactly for Sean, but she has voted differently than Sean 2 or 3 times up to that point. So if I'm in Kathy's shoes, I still think she probably made the right decision. I don't think there was a right or wrong decision in that case because she was probably screwed either way. But it's kind of hard because you have one group saying they won't, they potentially might vote the other one, and you have one that's saying we will never do this ever. Like I will go to rocks instead of voting for this person, which wild in season 4. So what did you guys think of Pascal as a character? What did you think of their relationship? And what do you, as it comes to race, do you think it played a huge part in a lot of the decisions made in the season, or do you think that it was played up by Pascal or Sean or V or Nalia or whoever? Gia, we'll go with you first, and move to Sarah.
Well, I have a lot to say about this topic because I've written quite extensively about the role that race plays in Marquesas, particularly in Sean's his boot episode, which is kind of the central theme of that episode. And rightfully so, because Sean deserves to have his story told. And the fact that we had a contestant like Sean is incredible because he was so open and honest and able to really explain complex feelings and experiences of Black contestants on this show in an easily digestible way. So I'm always going to be grateful that a character like Sean was in Marquesas. I wish he played like 5 more times since then. He deserves it, but that's another story for another day. In terms of Pascal, I mean, he had some moments, but he has the same issue that really rubs me the wrong way with a lot of old school Survivor players in particular, but that he holds a certain standard of values like loyalty and honesty that truly just do not have a place in Survivor. Like you want to have someone there or a small collective of people there that you can be somewhat honest and somewhat loyal with. But at the end of the day, this is a game where you vote people out to get $1 million, and you have to convince the people on the jury that you are the one that deserves the $1 million. And players that don't really understand that and think that anyone that goes against the grain of what they want to do is there's something morally wrong with them is not my type of player. And I feel like that is the type of player that Pascal is. And we see that in the episode where Kathy has to choose between going with Nalea and Pascal or going with Sean and Vecepia. Now, I think Kathy made the wrong decision, and I think there's a couple reasons why that was the wrong decision, not just because of my favoritism towards Sean, but also, do I think Pascal was thinking that, Sean and V don't deserve to win because they're Black? No. But I do think that he was raised with a certain set of values, we'll call them, but like values that pertain to primarily white Christianity and heterosexual patriarchal values, and that people like Sean and Vecepia were really pushing against the grain for what we can expect in great Survivor players. And that's a good thing. That's a fantastic thing. And we should have more players like that. And I wish we had more players like Sean and Vecepia in the earliest seasons of Survivor. But because that didn't align with Pascal's values and what he thinks makes a great Survivor player, that's where it went into this personal thing. And I don't think he has the experience to talk about whether or not something is related to about race. If you have two Black players saying, we think that, they weren't even saying that they felt that they were going to get voted out of the game because they're Black. They said they felt like the assumption was our bond was tighter than it initially seems to be because we're both like the only two Black players this season, which is a perfectly logical thing to say. They have this bond related to it, but both Sean and Vecepia had also said multiple times they haven't always voted together, and they haven't always, and like I do believe that even though they had this very special bond, and it's a bond that exists to this day, that if one of them realized that they weren't going to be able to win the game if the other person was sitting there, that they would have chose themselves. And I think that's where Kathy's misstep is going, because that was not going to happen with Nalea and Pascal.
Sarah?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you were saying. Like, that's where my head was at too, was that, I feel like we really have seen why the diversity campaign was so important, because you do have Sean and Vecepia being the only two Black players that season, and everybody immediately targets them as, a duo. And you're right, they didn't always vote together. And Vecepia at the end of the day would have chosen herself. And I feel like Sean would have been the same way. And they would have chosen themselves because they fully believed in what it took to be a sole survivor and win $1 million. And they cared about that. And Pascal and Nalea, I don't really think they cared about that. I think they were just in it to be loyal. And, Pascal was all like, I have to be a fair and consistent judge. And I just hated all of that.
Taking this judge thing a little too seriously.
He's also no longer a judge because of scandalous reasons.
Because of things.
Yes.
And it's like...
But yeah, I really, Pascal rubbed me the wrong way as well. So I'm glad we can all agree on that, because, he was not there to win. He was not there to play Survivor. And people like that, like him and Gabriel, I'm like, y'all can just get away. Like, other people could have been in your shoes and wanted to win.
That purple rock was working God's miracles right there. Amen.
When Nalea, hey, when Kathy initially goes to them and says, hey, 5 and 6 is what's going to happen, and Pascal's like, so be it. It's like, what? What are you talking about? That made absolutely no sense. And I do feel like go ahead.
I was like, you do realize you can do something about that, right? Like, what's not clicking?
And it goes to something that happens at Final Tribal. I do think that if we were to rate the Final 5 as far as chances at winning at Final 5, like if they sat at the end next to other people in that group, I actually would put probably Sean 1, Kathy 2, but I would have Pascal at the bottom. Like, I don't think that Pascal beats anybody in the Final 4, even though, he's Poppy and he's all this other stuff. I think that he loses to Nalea. I think that he loses to V because V beat Nalea. I feel like he loses to Kathy because everyone loses to Kathy except for maybe Sean and whoever else I'm missing. But the jury, I think this is the first time that we've had a bitter, not from top to bottom, but where the majority have been upset. Season 1, we had one person. Season 2 didn't really seem like anyone was overly pissed off. And then season 3, Big Tom was pissed off at how Kim answered a couple questions, but it didn't seem like anyone was super pissed then. You get to this one, and they're probably all pissed drunk at this point, but you get Tammy's question, and you get John Carroll's question, which I think was constructive, but the fact that they keep pointing out the religion aspect, and, as someone that is not as religious as a lot of folks, I can't really attest to it, but what I appreciate about Vesepia's response is, that's between me and God that I have to deal with after this. And I'm playing a game, and yes, I'm sitting here saying all this, I'm speaking a lot about religion, but like, religion has nothing to do with me lying in this game. Just like, and this is not her words, but just like if I'm playing bullshit with y'all and I lie and I'm like the most religious person that's ever existed, I'm not going to feel bad if I win, because the point of the game is lie. So, Sarah, what do you think there is a place for religion in this game? Do you think that it, people can use it to, better their games, and do you think that makes them morally a bad or good person, or does it not matter at all?
I think the thing I love about Survivor the most is how it can relate to real life and what's going on, and I think we kind of see like a separation between church and state here, and how important that is in the game of Survivor. I think, people can bond over their religions, but that needs to go out the window when it comes to who played the best game, and morals and all of that needs to go out the window in Survivor. And I think this is the first time that we saw, a player like Vesepia who was religious, but she was able to say, I lied, I made moves, I played this game for what it was. And oh my gosh, I get chills. Like, that's just so revolutionary, and why I love Vesepia. Like, she's one of my top favorite winners, because she threw everything out the window from previous Survivor seasons, and she just completely re-envisioned the game, and moving forward, like, I think it just changed a lot.
I agree. I mean, we don't see it again until season 6, because 5 is up Hagonging. But season 6, we have one person in particular that flip-flops a lot, and yes, they don't inevitably win, but like, I do feel like if Rob Cesternino had sat at the end of Amazon, people potentially give him more credit for flip-flopping than they gave Vesepia, where Tammy and John are sitting there saying, you flip-flop more than anybody else. It's like, yeah, and look where I am, and look where you are. I understand that this is against the moral code of early Survivor, but we can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again, because if, we've seen what happens. The first 3 seasons, the final 2 both come from the same tribe. So this is the first time that 2 people come from 2 different tribes, and the majority of the jury, it's 6-1, I'm pretty sure, and Vesepia still wins 4-3 because people also took their tribal lines and threw them out the window. It's like, okay, we're going to vote for the best person, not based off of any type of alliance that we had in the game, except for Pascal, who definitely voted for Nalia because it's Nalia, and Sean probably voted for Vesepia because she was Vesepia. Everyone else just kind of took that out threw it out the window, and just went based off of how they felt about the person. Kathy can, Kathy
was a little bitter.
Kathy was much bitter, very bitter, and we see that in season 8 where she's still saying, "Oh yeah, I was robbed," and season 4 it's like, "Oh, relax,
please,
relax."
please.
You were the first person to fall out of the challenge, and nothing nefarious happened. Nalia's best move in the game was saying, "Oh, Kathy, you need to pull up your blouse." I love that, because as soon as she said that, she like goes back to doing like this, and it's like Sean and I think Tammy like very much zoned in on the fact that Nalia was playing up the whole "oh shucks, oh my heck" type thing. I do think she was actually like that, but I do think she milked it, and that's a good strategy. I think where Nalia, shit the bed, is the fact that she kept saying, "Oh, I didn't start playing the game until day 24 or whatever it was." It's like, you can't say that sitting next to someone that has said outright, "This is my strategy from the beginning of the game, day 0 to day 39," and you can't say day 24 to day 39 and expect people to vote for you. Also, the scene with the mint is my favorite scene of the entire season, mainly because like a very underrated part of that is Vesepia saying, "Oh no, thank you, sweetie." I'm like, oh my goodness, I know you yell at this person, but you're keeping it in.
Yeah, and I think that it's like Vecepia is a very intentional player. She did not get to the end by accident or or like by just circumstance. This was calculated on her part. And even when she was talking about like her religion, like Vecepia is a very religious person, but she has this really great confessional in one of the first tribal councils about how she finds strength in Jesus Christ, but other people may find strength elsewhere. Like they may find it in a different god like Buddha, or they might find it with the stars or some other element. But that I think that's a great explanation of kind of where religion can fit in the game as well, because like different people find strength in different aspects. Like I'm not a particularly religious person, but I might find strength in thinking about my family back home, and Vecepia found strength in God, and other people might find strength in something else. So if you can convince people that your religion strengthened your hold on the game without making other people feel bad that they aren't religious, then like more power to you. I think that's also one of the reasons why I like Vecepia so much as a winner.
I like the fact she kept a journal and basically broke
the journal.
the last challenge.
Can we talk about the journal?
Yeah. And the fact that I know where she's from. I'm not going to tell them because I know I'm going home.
Yes, that was every season. Well, most seasons have like a wham moment. The one where you're like, this is how it's going to go. We saw it last season with Marianne, which she does the little I did with like flipping the vote against Omar. But like there's so many seasons have like that wham moment. And most people would say for Marquesas, it's when Sean says this is the order that's going to go, because that leads to where they flip and vote John out. But for me, the wham line of the season is I know where Patricia's from, because that's exactly how you know where things are going to go from here. She is purposefully hiding information. They know it's going to be a quiz. She has been preparing for a quiz on her former contestants. She's one of the only players that has played with every single person in the tribe. Every single person that's left, or like every single person of the season, I should say. And like she has used that to her utmost advantage. And that is the type of things that Survivor players should be taking notes on, especially in the old school game. It's just, the journal. It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Two things about that I had no idea when I first watched it was that it was a book of poems. It wasn't even a journal. And she like had extra pages in the back too. She was going to write poems while she was there. But then she was like, okay, I need to write notes on people. And then the other thing is, I know this was in her deep dive with Rob, where apparently like no one had seen her taking notes except for one person. Do y'all know who it was?
No.
I listened to the deep dive, but I can't remember. Was it Nalia?
It was Zoe.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah, Zoe's the only person who caught her taking notes on people, and Vecepia was so terrified that Zoe was going to use that against her and vote her out. So I just thought that was really funny.
It's that she just voted for Nalia at the end. V does not stand for victory. I don't know what the hell that meant, but fine, Zoe. Zoe was fine. The general was fine.
Favorite character. I just think she's so dry.
I was never in an alliance. As soon as John gets voted out and everyone starts trying to jump ship, like, I was never in an alliance. And the general's like, I never said anything. It's like, well, you did. And it's just so funny watching, like, Tammy's the only one that like stands there and says, yep, it was the four of us. I'm not going to back down from that. That's the coward's way out. A couple more things, then we're gonna bounce. Of course, it's YouTube that I went my longest for, but it's fine because I made time for it. That's a good thing, by the way. That was not an insult to either one of you. I love both of you. Like, one, family visit. This might be a deep cut to people listening. This might be a deep cut to y'all. Does anyone know who Morris Chestnut is?
Yeah, the actor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sean's friend looks like Morris Chestnut. Go and look at him. He looks exactly
100%.
He looks exactly like Morris Chestnut. For people that don't know who Morris Chestnut is, watch Boys in the Hood, The Best Man Holiday.
Beautiful bald man. That's all you need to know.
Beautiful bald man.
Yes.
That's not Taye Diggs.
True.
The other thing, because we're 35 minutes in, and we haven't talked about this person yet, this is the first season with Rob Mariano. He is a
Meh.
fun... Huh?
Said meh.
He's a fun character at the beginning of the, in the pre-merge. I would say that him and Sean are the catalysts for everything that happens at, like, Rob confronting Zoe about the Row 24 and telling Kathy, and on his way out, he's saying, hey, all this stuff is going on. And then he goes off. I think that sets up perfectly that final 9 where Sean continues this storyline and Kathy continues this, and Vecepia off camera is continuing this. I do think that Rob added what he needed to this season. The thing is, if Gabe had just kept his fucking mouth shut and played along, we would have never seen Rob Mariano again, because he would have gotten cut first. They would have, won the next challenge. Gina would have gone home. We would have gone in the merge with Gabe as probably the merge move. Instead, Gabe ran his mouth. Rob survives. We get Rob 4 more times. So I do think that Rob is a important character in the early part of this game, and I do feel like he was a catalyst for whatever happens next. All of that to say, my rating for Survivor Marquesas is a 4 out of 5. And I would put it right with Africa. As far as I put it above Africa, but Marquesas, I've told it plenty of times on here. Vecepia winning, cried at my mom's hair salon. It was a big moment. 20 years later, I'd do it again with Marianne. The characters are amazing. John Carroll's one of the most amazing early season villains, and not in a malicious way, just in a game way. The Row 24, the rise and fall of the Row 24, one of the biggest storylines of the first few seasons. Nalia's meant. I'm just up next, sadly, I have Survivor Thailand, which mercifully I could be done. If I just went ahead and just watched it all, I could be done by like 1 a.m. and never have to worry about it again. But knowing me, I'm probably going to have to spread it out until tomorrow afternoon. But that's a tomorrow problem. Thank you two so much for spending 40 minutes of your day to come talk about a season that we all love. Thank everyone else that's been tuning in and reaching out and asking if you can come on for these reviews. Please continue to do that, because there's still a few seasons that 5 seasons that I don't have somebody for. I will be having Sarah and Gia back at I think Gia's next one is Fiji.
Of course.
Sarah's, let's see. Do you know off the top of your head?
Pick one for me.
Oh, well, no, I have it written down. I just, oh my goodness.
I don't know if I ever told you like one for sure.
Oh, yes, that's true, because I don't have you're not here. So Sarah will be back sooner or later. Between now, September 10th is when we are supposed to be done with this. If we can finish by September 10th, I will have successfully done this. But that's a ways to go. Thank you all again, and we'll see you after Thailand.
Thank you.